was gonna make a blind joke, but I decided it was in bad taste. Welcome to this episode of Conditions in D&D. We're talking about blindness. Now, the blind condition is a pretty self-explanatory one. You cannot see, pretty obvious there, and you fail any checks relying on vision. Additionally, all attacks against you have advantage, and all attacks made by you have disadvantage. I would run this like reverse invisibility, where you can't attack any other creature unless you know their position, or else you just go to the wrong space and miss. This encourages cooperation, as players should kind of direct you to where to go without visual cues, so that you don't have to waste your action trying to search for where they are. And even if you do get to their place, they can simply move away and you can't do anything about it because opportunity attacks rely on sight. Even trying to ready your action for something is extremely difficult, as you don't have a visual cue as, oh, when the enemy passes by, I attack, because you can only hear, so you don't know if they're friend or foe, which means you could ready your action and attack the wrong person. Sort of adding this element of disbelief is something many technological tools can assist with to really make that blinding condition come to life. But I think if you take it all the way, it can be something that isn't just a minor stat detriment on the board. But blinding an enemy is a really effective way to inhibit them, as there's a lot of ways to gain advantage against enemies, but imposing disadvantage is rare and especially useful. Now, being able to find where the enemy is often harder to do as a player than if you put it on an enemy, as normally there's going to be that one martial player attacking the enemy, as the enemies you want to blind are normally more bossy and normally the focus of the party rather than weak little minions. You don't want to waste it on them. But if you coordinate something interesting, maybe having all range attacks and things like that, then the blinded enemy has a really hard time figuring out where players might be, and may even waste their action trying to figure out where they are. Of course, this is more useful against non-spellcasters than otherwise. There's a lot of effects that blind. Prismatic Wall, Prismatic Spray, Color Spray, Blindness Deafness, Divine Word, Contagion, one effect of it. Gosh, there are a lot of spells that blind. Feign Death, Holy Aura, Sunbeam, Sunburst, and there's a host of others. There's a lot of enemy effects that impose blindness, like the Solar's Light and Radiance effect. The Cloaker has an effect that blind. I don't need to go on, there's a lot of them. Effects that remove blindness are your basic condition assistance spells like Lesser Restoration, Heal, and Mass Heal. Blind effects means you can't use any effects that have that creature you can see or area you can see effects, like Intimidating Presence, the Protection, Fighting Style, any effect that puts something or takes you to an unoccupied space you can see. The dodge action also requires you to see your attacker. There are a lot of detriments that come with the blinded condition, in addition just to what is written in that small text. Again, any effect that means you must see the target to be able to use it, like Bane, Banishment, Command, Animal Friendship, etc., would all be deemed unusable if you have the mind condition on you. Normally this is common sense, but you might be surprised at what spells do or do not require you to see the creature. Interestingly enough, any effect that means you must see the enemy means you can't use it against hidden creatures. Be going over the hide action eventually, but that is something to keep in mind. Also, a blinded creature can only counterspell something if they can identify the verbal components of it, as you have to know they're casting that spell to be able to stop them. Now, there isn't many of these effects, but it is worth noting some effects require the enemy to be able to see you, and that is removed if you blind them. There isn't many of these, but like the antipathy, sympathy spell, as well as a few class abilities, do require the enemy to be able to see you. Additionally, when you're swallowed by a creature, often blindness is rolled, so keep note of that when using spells and whatnot. Heavily obscured counts as blinded when you're searching in a heavily obscured area, or in one yourself, like in heavy fog or whatnot. Again, dark vision. If you don't have dark vision and you're in complete darkness, you're essentially blinded. This is one way as a DM you can impose the blindness condition without having an enemy impose it. But finding one that does is a relatively easy task. Additionally, though rare, some creatures that have blind sight aren't always immune to the blinding condition, but this just means that now that they are blinded, they rely solely on blind sight, so it isn't as effective. Additionally, though, interestingly enough, blind sight creatures are blind past their radius, if that's the only thing they rely on, which means that you can stand outside the blind sight radius and make a ranged attack, and that will be with advantage, as they are technically blinded and attack rolls have advantage against them. Also, if you're seeing through your familiar, you of course are deaf and blind yourself, which means if you're going up an enemy like Medusa, you could potentially take advantage of that by yourself not being determined by the effect, but maybe using your familiar to get sort of a bird's eye view of what's going on. Of course, there's no reason why you can't just close your eyes and blind yourself, which means if you're going up against a Medusa or something like that, you can blind yourself to prevent worse effects. Your work, man. I thought the outdoors were supposed to be peaceful. Well, anyways, like all conditions, of course, some creatures are of course immune, but luckily with the blinded condition, it is normally easy to tell whether or not a creature has eyes. So, the blinded condition, more common one, but I don't see it as often as I would like to in D&D, is something that adds a very interesting dynamic to the combat scene, so I'll definitely make use of it, as it can be detrimental when used on both sides. Never go wrong with that condition. This is Sean from Dodeca Dungeon, signing off on this episode of Conditions in D&D.